Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Street Peace Coalition on Chicago Comcast Cable 21, CAN TV. This is a live call-in show. So we want to invite everyone who's viewing us now to call in and have a discussion with us about violence in Chicago, violence in the black community. My name is Minister Michael Muhammad, founder of the co-founder of the Street Peace Coalition, and I'll be with you for the next 20 to 25 minutes or so, advancing our statements about violence. The Street Peace Coalition is a group that has been operating throughout Chicago's south and west sides for about the last 5 to 6 years. And we have a unique perspective, a unique strategy, a unique programmatic effort to redress violence, especially in the black community. And so we invite you to check us out on the World Wide Web. In fact, you can check us out on the World Wide Web at streetpeacecoalition.weebly.com. You can get a snapshot of some of our activities and some of the things we've done. You can also keep up with us on Facebook at facebook.com Street Peace Coalition, where we regularly post news and information about all things related to violence. And so if you want to keep updated or get educated even on certain subject matter related to Chicago's violence, you can go to our Facebook page on a weekly basis. We update that page at least once a week with fresh and critical information for anybody who wants to study or stay informed and abreast on subjects related to violence, not only in the black community, but in different cities throughout America and even globally. And so tonight, we want to raise a few issues about violence. I want to start tonight with a sobering fact that all of us as Chicagoans, especially native Chicagoans, we need to think about. And I read a stat that showed that Chicago has more violence than both New York and Los Angeles combined. That's very sobering that Chicago, Illinois, right here in the Midwest, we have more violence, gun violence, than New York and Los Angeles combined, two huge cities. So what's going on in Chicago? But before we go any further with that, I want to go to the caller. See, we have a caller. Is the caller on the air?
Yeah, hello?
Yes, go ahead, caller.
Just change again. Like I told you last week, the media is probably the problem, and Eddie Johnson is probably the problem, and they all get in front of the media about they going to do this and that. And then, like I told you last week, you hear more violence like last week. Like Tuesday when you left that Monday night. And then what happened about Tuesday morning on 43rd and Ashland, and there's be more shooting. And they just like Rod Mack, and then Eddie Johnson them probably the problem, the media. And then every time when somebody comes in, okay, like when they they go to the west side and south side, and then they probably the problem.
Okay.
And somebody like and then what's it used for marching and stuff, the media probably the problem.
Okay. Thank you, caller.
This James again. This James the one who called you last week.
All right, James. Thank you for calling back in. Thank you for watching. I tend to agree with James that the police are a part of the problem. They are not the total problem, but they are a big player in the problem, in giving life to a problem, helping to sustain a problem. But of course, it is in many ways in their interest, because law enforcement as an industry certainly does not want to go out of business. And historically and currently, the black community is always served as a commodity for one industry or another. And so when we talk about crime, black people are a cottage industry, because we're used to justify bloated budgets. We're used to justify tax increases, to double down on the bloated budgets that are mismanaged, the over-militarization of civil municipal police departments, all the way through to criminal justice, all the way through to prison industrial complex. It is our community that is considered a commodity there. And so it is not far-fetched that we should expect and anticipate or know through research and investigation that there are forces throughout America that represent law enforcement that want a level of violence to justify the kind of resources that they are exposed to and have access to through policing. The media, he said, is part of the problem. I agree. He said marching will not solve the problem. I agree. And so as a Street Peace Coalition, we may participate in someone else's march here or there, but generally it is against our policy. We do not believe in marching against violence. We do not really believe that prayer vigils is an effective strategy, social strategy for violence. It may be an effective spiritual strategy for those who are already spiritually inclined. But even a prayer vigil, in a very real sense, has no impact on those who are shooting, for the most part. And so we don't use those strategies first and foremost. We have some other techniques, some other strategies that we employ and deploy. And you're more than welcome to drop us a line on Facebook or through our website. You can send us a message if you want to get involved, if you want to make a change on your block. If it's just a block, we will take you through our rigors, and we will come and assist you on that block. If there's a neighborhood where you're already active, or you want to get active, especially when it comes to trying to slow down the hostile environment of your neighborhood, then you need to drop us a line. You need to reach out to us so we can connect, and we can have you as a leader in your own neighborhood. We will come and lend our expertise and our support to the best of our abilities. We, again, are an unfunded group. We fund ourselves in our own activities. And we've done it that way from our inception, to eliminate people who are only concerned with violence if someone can promise them a paycheck. We really are not interested in working with people who want to exploit, or what we say in the hood, pimp our poverty. We don't want to labor under the illusion that we are working with people who are really committed out of a sense of responsibility, dignity, and love, but are really only moving when there's money involved. So we have remained unfunded up to this point because we didn't start out our mission looking for money. And we went through a 3-year process to vet and screen out individuals who were a part of our inception to make sure that we boiled ourselves down, distilled ourselves down to those who are truly sincere, sincerely motivated. And so having said that, I want to go back to raising this question about Chicago. What is it about Chicago that makes us have more gun violence in Chicago than LA and New York combined? What is going on in Chicago? What is driving violence in Chicago in a way that is not happening in these two other large cities? We're the top 3 cities in the United States. New York is a lot larger. Los Angeles is larger, especially if you factor in Los Angeles County. But either way, what's going on in Chicago? How do we so dramatically eclipse the level of violence in Chicago, unlike any other city in America? There's something organic. There's something native, I will say, is a better word, to Chicago, the city of Chicago. There's something going on in the black community in Chicago. There's something going on in the black and brown community in Chicago that makes the nature of violence and the volume of violence in Chicago exceptional, to say the least. And so when we talk about violence, if we don't do critical assessment, if we don't do critical analysis, if all of our assessment is emotional, if all of our reactions to violence are just that, reactionary, then we will continue to be the victims of some forces that seem to be very calculated, seem to be very non-emotional. There's some drivers of violence, and it is not simply about people who may be angry, and it's just not about a bunch of angry, rageful, hateful people walking around. There's something going on because you have angry, hateful, rageful people in New York, Los Angeles, and other big metropolitan areas. But what is it about it in Chicago that Chicago would have a rate that is more than the combined rate? When you put New York and Los Angeles together in terms of gun violence, murders, Chicago has more than both of them put together. So what is going on? What are our elected officials doing? What are our law enforcement doing? How is the thinking, the sentiment, the perspective, the agenda, the goals and objectives of those who control our social institutions? How are their goals, objectives, etc., producing this effect in Chicago? What is it about our elected officials? What is it about our civic and private leadership and their position, policies, and practices with regard to violence, especially in the black and brown community in Chicago, that is so different from their peers and partners or equals in New York and Los Angeles, that those cities which are larger than Chicago have less gun death? I think this is a pertinent question. I think these are questions that the media need if they care. What is it about the media even? in the way they cover and report violence, the way they investigate. Why are not media outlets raising these kind of questions? Because things don't happen in a vacuum. Phenomena does not manifest in a vacuum. It is not just accidental that Chicago has more murders and gun violence than New York and Los Angeles combined. That is not an accidental phenomenon, because the truth is, if you understand most of what goes on in society has a control factor. And so there are engines behind our social institution. They're driving thoughts, they're driving forces, they're driving people, they're driving practices, policies, laws, ordinances that drive our society in one direction or another, depending upon the desired outcomes of those leaders, those thought leaders, those economic leaders over a given social domain. So what's going on with those people in Chicago? What's going on with the leaders in media, to even raise these questions to the people we have entrusted some form of leadership over the broader community in Chicago, and especially black leadership? Why have not black leadership come up with a better practice and policy with regard to violence in the black community? Why are we stuck with the same mantra that we need to lock up more people with guns, we need to toughen and throw more people in jail? That is not working, and so it seems very disingenuous to keep practicing a policy that has failed and has only exacerbated or intensified the problem. We have a caller. Caller, go ahead with your question or comment.
Yes, sir. I called last week. You're an honest man. But you know what? It's not too honest. All these politicians, they're the ones that should be locked up, not the people. You go every 4 years, you put them in office, you have hundreds of millions of dollars in construction going downtown. Not one African American, not one Hispanic claimants up there. Those are the people you should march against. But don't march against our own people. March against those people that we put in. We, and I say we, and I'm not proud of that. Mm-hmm. We put in every 4 years. Mm-hmm. Every 4 years, and nothing is ever done. I hope through this show that we can start getting people to realize that, hey, it ain't just City Hall. It starts there, but it's the people that you vote for every 4 years. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, caller, and I agree with you that we must hold leadership accountable. We must hold leadership accountable. But unfortunately, in America, most of us, we are so burdened in this what we call rat race that has been erected in the name of capitalism. We are so bogged down in the minutia of this fine, this fee, this tax, this bill. We are so bogged down in the minutia of just trying to have a fundamentally stable life, on top of being dumbed down through mass media, which has numbed our critical thinking skills, which has, really done a good mind job on Americans in general, that there's really a high level of apathy from the average American in terms of engaging in the type of activity that would hold our elected officials and others accountable to what is right, what is true, what is just, and what is effective for the long-term health of our neighborhoods, our cities, and our towns. That requires a level of maturity. That requires a certain level of sacrifice that, quite frankly, because we have been so peppered with the need for money, and the other side of that coin is the lust for money, that we really, our values don't drive us to make those kind of sacrifices for the greater whole. So while we can see mass demonstrations on TV quite frequently, whether it's a union or whatever, that's still a minority of people who actually engage in some type of process. So many of us even will call in a show like this, but we will not spend 1 hour out of our week engaging. We will not spend 1 hour out of our week actually volunteering or getting involved in an actual organized effort that requires some commitment and some level of self-sacrifice. Most of us, we've been so socialized to be so selfish and so self-centered that, as I said in the beginning, if somebody does not pay us to organize voters, if somebody does not pay us to intervene in violence, if somebody does not pay us to mentor young men, if somebody does not pay us to mentor young women, then we don't have that motivation if there's not money involved. And so this is how the rich, the super rich, are able to control so much, because they can pay us to work in their organizations to drive agenda that they set in meetings where we have no clue of what an organization is really about, because it's being funded by somebody who has a crystal clear plan on how to take control of a government agency or a political office or a social service agency or some institution in society. These things are driven by people with deep money who have made us so apathetic that most of us will not engage without being paid. And so when we talk about the problem, we've got to look at ourselves. We've got to do some introspection and realize how our lack of action in many ways is just as culpable as some of the shooters, because we're not engaged. We're not engaged sufficiently to start to have an impact even on our own block and in our own neighborhood. So again, I want to thank all of you. We're out of time. I want to thank you for tuning back in to the Street Peace Coalition on CAN TV 21. I hope you'll tune in to us next week. Have your calls, questions, and comments ready. And again, drop us a line if you want to get involved and get engaged. This is Minister Michael Muhammad signing off for the Street Peace Coalition.